Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection with Dr. George Gonzalez. Dr. Gonzalez, can you get started by just reflecting on that moment in life when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor? What was it that attracted you to this profession, to this path?
Well, there's a few of them, but I remember specifically when I decided that I wanted to do it as a profession. I was in martial arts, and I knew how to move the body and throw people and do all those kind of things. And this woman who was in a dance studio next door came up to me and said, "I heard you could help me." And I said, "Sure, what?" And she said, I have a problem with my back. And I did some manipulations then, and she was so happy that she actually paid me. And I was like, I get paid for this? This is awesome. So I had many other things happen in my life, but that was the moment I said I want to be a chiropractor and do this professionally.
Yeah, can you reflect on maybe your upbringing and also your background with martial arts? And you said that you were able to do some things on her. What if you're really trying to create a bigger context for where you were at in life? What was positioning you to be open to that even as a possibility because there's a lot of education involved. It's a huge commitment. So can you maybe just unpack a little bit more on what your background was at that moment, what you were up to in life, professionally speaking?
If I knew what I was getting into, I might not have done it. I was never a good student in school, and it really was the passion to want to be a doctor of chiropractic that made me go for it. You're going to have to study 30 hours a week or whatever the number was. I don't remember, but it was a lot compared to college, level studying and the workload. And I was like, I don't care. This is what I want. This is what I'm going for. Put me on the escalator ride that ends in DC at the end, and I did it, and everybody else does too, that puts their nose to the grindstone and goes through the program. It's there to train us how to be a doctor and pass the board exams and go out into life, right?
Definitely. Can you kind of give some context to the moment you decided you wanted to go and become a chiropractor to the moment that you were actually starting chiropractic school? How long was that period of time, and what did you do to prepare yourself for chiropractic school? Did you move to a new state to go to chiropractic school? And then once you arrived on campus, what was that experience like of becoming a chiropractic student? Maybe some challenges you had to overcome or surprises that you encountered?
I'll answer as many of those as I can. I don't know if I'll remember all those questions, but I just finished college at Loyola Marymount University with a business degree. And I said to myself, I'm never going back to school. I really didn't thrive in that environment. And, I told you the story when I decided to go into chiropractic school. And getting into school, I went to an accelerated course for getting my science prereqs, physics, chemistry, and so on. And then I started chiropractic school. It was probably a year and a half to 2 years. During that interim time, I went to massage school. I went to shiatsu school for a year. And just to be sure, this is, hands-on all day long kind of thing. This is what I like doing. And I really enjoyed it. And so by the time I went to chiropractic school, I had hands-on experience. I started working with Dr. Adam Yoser in the surf tour very early on in chiropractic, during chiropractic school. He was one of the instructors at the massage school I was going to. And he was the doctor for the Pro Surf Tour, Southern California. So I had a lot of wonderful experiences with pro athletes early on that has served me throughout, school and my professional career as well. And so, that getting into school, it was, again, I wasn't the strongest student. I really struggled in those areas. I found out that I was an auditory learner in chiropractic school. So, it's a long time ago, but we would buy the notes from people that were ahead of us in quarters. I know now everything's digital, but We literally had to go to the copy store with stacks of paper and print out the notes, and then I was able to just listen in class and with a highlighter highlight the key things and maybe jot down a couple things. While this thing, as soon as I start writing, it's like my ears shut off and I don't get any more information. And so I that really helped me a lot. And then my wife would actually read my notes to me, and that would help me just get everything locked in. And I turned out to be much smarter than I had thought my whole life. Then quantum neurology came along, and people associate being smart with neurology. So it was not my original experience. So things developed over time, and develop an expertise in neurology. It's very powerful.
Yeah, where'd the inspiration come from to go deeper with neurology? Because obviously becoming a chiropractor is rooted in neuroscience and studying natural healing principles and even quantum physics. But you coining the term quantum neurology, can you kind of describe the origin story behind that and what the inspiration was?
Absolutely. I was in my 10th term in chiropractic school, and I was already developing techniques that I teach today. But my wife suffered a moderate spinal cord injury. She went completely numb from the navel, her groin, her backside, the backs of her legs, and the bottoms of her feet. And that's called a cauda equina syndrome. She was injured in those areas, and she was just getting worse and worse and worse. And when you have studied the textbook and you see the little guy standing there with the shaded parts of his body and as representing numbness, and you answer that text box on the test, it doesn't really hit until somebody you actually are working on has those patterns of loss, and especially a loved one. And that's one of those OS moments, what do I do now? The things that I had learned were not providing a solution for my wife at that time. And I took her to my first chiropractor, Dr. Mark Pick. And if you're familiar with him, he's an anatomy expert as well as a neurology expert. And he had a waiting list practice. We finally got my wife in to see him. And within one session, he was able to get her deep tendon reflexes to come back on below the waist, which was the first sign of improvement we've seen like in that many months period. And I was like, what do I do? I was a student, no money. I really didn't have a lot of resources other than the kindness of doctors helping us. And he said, you need to learn neurology. And the shorter story is I didn't have the money to go through the large neurology program or the time. My wife was injured now. I needed answers now. So I literally went to UCLA. I would go to their bookstore. I would go to their library. I'd pull off every neurology book off the shelf, and I would just read. I didn't know what I was reading at first, but things start getting put together after a while. And I've been given this talent. I pray, and I prayed for healing for my wife, and I give God the glory for the talent that He's given us, which is now quantum neurology. And using these principles of nervous system rehabilitation, we were able to recover my wife completely. They had told us that she would not be able to get pregnant because of her sacral nerves were damaged. We have a 14-year-old beautiful daughter, and they told us to get a wheelchair for her because she was just declining very quickly. And thankfully, none of those things that they had told us came to fruition. We were able to turn her situation around. It took 10 years of fully working out neurology and unpacking this gift to really understand the wholeness of the nervous system. So, first it was motor. We were understanding how to restore motor function in the body. And then, it was like, I woke up in the middle of the night when I could do this to cranial nerves. And I had already forgotten all the cranial nerves because, you take that test and you're like, oh, I'll never use that again, And then I was like, no, this is important, So I restudied the cranial nerves. And then I started applying these principles of rehabilitation to the cranial nerves. And we've seen tremendous rehabilitation that comes from doing that. And the same with the sensory nerves and the visceral nerves and all the actions that we've developed with quantum neurology to be able to restore function. Now, I know a lot of the people you're talking to are students or recent graduates or people interested in chiropractic school. When you go to chiropractic school or any medical school whatsoever, they're going to teach the basis of neurology, myotomes, cranial nerves, and how to do those exams. Now, when in school, when they teach us those things, we would ask, hey, what do we do when we find one of these things? And they're like, oh, you just jot it down, and see if it changes later. And at least at that point in my career as a student, I was like, well, what do I need to do that for? If I can't fix it, why am I even checking it, And the beauty of quantum neurology is we now have an answer to that question that I asked back in school is what do we do when we find a neurological problem in a person is we have a strategy for rehabilitation. We have a strategy for rehabilitating motor nerves, cranial nerves, sensory nerves, autonomic function, and visceral function. And these are very quick things that we can do. It's all hands-on. We use light therapy as well. We also use other instruments, to do corrections, similar to an activator type, reflex type instruments to make corrections, but very simple to perform on the body. It's not heavy lifting, and then also to deliver great results to your patients. The big thing that I had to get honest with coming out of school, and like everybody, I think coming out of school, I would see somebody, and I would just adjust every joint in their body, because we have to learn how to do that, right? And I thought, well, hey, this is the best way to service somebody is to give them the whole thing, right? And then when I started checking neurology on people, I had to be really honest with myself. I said, well, let me check the neurology. Let me adjust every segment in the body. And let me recheck the neurology afterwards. And there was very little change. There's very little difference in the neurological pattern that I found. And so I had to step back and say, well, that's not working. That's not providing the higher level service that I want. Yes, it feels great to be manipulated everywhere, and I wouldn't mind having that done once in a while. But when we're truly trying to help people get well, when we want to raise their bar in health and healing, we need to identify the specific nerve that we're trying to correct, and then we need to make a shift to make that correction to see a real-time before and after neurological shift. And that's what's life-changing. That's why what we're doing with quantum neurology is such a big deal, because we're able to take cranial nerves, cranial nerve 10, responsible for your parasympathetic nerve supply, real important nerve. We're able to rehabilitate that in seconds doing these strategies. And then we also have exercises, nerve-specific exercises that we do to strengthen these actions, and patients could go home doing those as well. So it's a lot of new concepts. It's things that you've already learned in school, but it's just a new way of applying a rehabilitative strategy to them. And once you understand those principles, it's there. You see a nerve turn on for the first time, and you see, whether it's a muscle that's not firing or a Bell's palsy that comes back online, or hearing or vision, or all these miraculous level healings happen when you turn the nerve supply back on. Basic chiropractic philosophy, right? It's the nerve supply that makes everything work. If that nerve supply is compromised, and we used to think bone on nerve, right? And yes, that could happen, but it's more accurately described as neurological inhibition. Inhibition is if we have one of those knobs, like a volume knob on a light or on a radio, inhibition is the knob is on low, right? It's not completely disconnected. Excuse me here. I'm going to have to turn that off. It's not completely disconnected. A complete disconnect would mean that the tissue shrivels up and falls off, right? But it's somewhere on a lower function than we would desire. And with our strategies, we strengthen the nervous system. We raise that rheostat up so that the nerve is functioning at a higher level, ideally fully functioning, and then the body can heal itself. So the same principles of chiropractic apply. The body heals itself, inside out, above down. All those beautiful principles of chiropractic. Innate intelligence is what heals your body, and following the nervous system is one of the biggest keys I could share with new doctors out there. Is I may be an intelligent person and I could look at somebody and I say, "Oh, your shoulder's out," but that doesn't help the person. I just say your shoulder's out, right? But I have to actually test their body to see how that shoulder wants to be corrected. And I could do that through the neurology. I check the neurology of the body, the myotones, and if their C5 deltoid is weak, I can make a correction at the level of C5. I can adjust the segment of C5, but I need to know which direction to correct it in. And all this is demonstrated on the body. If I could choose the direction, I'm going to find strength again. And that's the correct way to move that segment. And I'm just giving little principles. There's more detail, of course, when I actually teach people how to do this. But the principle is there. We want to stimulate the body's natural actions and reactions to achieve a desired result. And the way I explain this to a patient is if they have a problem extending their knee, the deep tendon reflex, you hit the reflex on the knee and it kicks out, right? So why don't we use that strategically, tap that reflex to get that knee to extend, right? It's using the body's natural actions and reactions to achieve a desired result. And we're just doing this strategically throughout the body. We're using all the reflexes, all the different things that we've learned. We're using strategies that I've invented, such as a race, that every range of motion has 4 ranges within it that have to be addressed. And if you don't address all 4, you're not going to correct the overall range of motion. So all these principles are really powerful, and they've led us to having high levels of success with all ranges of patients, whether they're wheelchair quadriplegics, and we get them to start using their body again and getting function back into their body, or all the way to elite athletic performance to the highest levels of medals and records that are available in the world. So, and everything in between, right? We all fall somewhere in there. So it's a powerful, powerful strategy to share with doctors. When we teach doctors how to do this, we give them the power to, quote unquote, see the nervous system. So we're giving you the tools to evaluate the body to literally find out exactly what nerve is off. Every nerve in your body goes to muscle, tissue, organ, or bone. So if you understand the patterns of the body and every nerve level and what muscle, tissue, organ, and bone it goes to, we have the strategies to turn those areas of the body on like an electrician. So it's a lot of fun to do. It's a really amazing concept to bring to your patients. People love it. I work a lot with athletes, and to see their function come back online, and they, whether they're running or swimming or jumping, whatever it is, they come back with a personal best after getting the nerves firing, as they should be.
I appreciate you doing a deep dive right there, and I just want to give you a little more context as we're centering our voice on not only chiropractors but also chiropractic students and prospective students. A lot of this narrative, or a lot of this dialogue that we're having here, I'm intending to have it be paralleled to some of the different stages in the life cycle that we go through as becoming chiropractors.
Absolutely.
And you touched on a number of things there. You touched on what it was like to be in practice. I'm curious if you could unpack that a little more, of like how you've designed your practice. How long are you spending with people? When people come into your practice, what does it look like, feel like? How long are you kind of creating care plans for people, or following up with people over long periods of time? Because my understanding of nerves is that they take a really long time to really develop new patterns of sort of consistent firing, like frequency of firing changes. And I'm just curious if you can continue to sort of help us better understand the type of clinical experience that you've designed for the people you take care of.
Absolutely. So I practice out of a few different offices right now. I see high-end clientele, and that's higher cost lower visits kind of thing. People usually travel in to see me, and they'll come in for a certain period of time. I've had people come in from other countries and literally buy a house down the street so that I could see them as often as I need to. I'm focused on teaching quantum neurology to doctors. The concept of when I developed this work originally, I was thinking to myself, well, what's my biggest effect in the world? If I practice, I could probably see 100,000 patient visits in my career, and just kind of guesstimate through the numbers that we usually see, kind of thing. And then I thought to myself, well, if I teach one other person, that's 200,000, and for every person we add, it's another 100,000 people that get exposed to these principles of neurological rehabilitation. And it's a labor of love. We've been doing this for 20 years now. We've been teaching doctors how to evaluate the nervous system, get these high-end results with neurological rehabilitation. And, we're shifting the model now to a higher version of the training, to be much more intensive training, to certify somebody in a very short period of time so that they could get out there and start doing the work as quickly as possible. But it's going to be much more interactive than it was previously. We're going to be working directly with each doctor that we train, and we're going to show them how to get the wins right away, making double checking their work and making sure that they're ready to get certified to take on neuro cases as soon as possible.
Yeah, I remember Mark Pick had some tools that he had developed that were neurology specific tools. Do you use any of those tools when you're working with people? And if not, I'm just curious, quantum neurology, have you guys been conducting research? You said you've been teaching for 20 years now. I'm curious about the research or the community and the people that you attract to take your courses, and maybe how long they've been in practice. Are they new? Are they students? And then also like any goals or intentions that you have as far as like inviting people into your community and ways that they can engage with you in studying quantum neurology a little bit further if they're interested.
Absolutely. So, starting with Dr. Mark Pick, he's an incredible man. I call him my Chiro father. He is such an inspiration, creative thinker, artist. If you ever get to see his office and his workspace, it's like stepping into a different dimension. It's amazing. And he's an anatomy expert. So he builds anatomical models, and he does it's endless what he's doing for our profession. It's amazing. So please check out Dr. Mark Pick. Amazing work, sacral occipital technique master, as well as an anatomist. He teaches anatomy courses, which is a high recommend. From there, I don't remember what your next questions were, but
it's just that he had created some tools. I'm curious, with quantum neurology, what tools do you need to practice with?
Right.
You had said it's all hands-on, but then you had mentioned light therapy, and then you also, I believe, mentioned an activator or an arthrostim.
Correct. Yeah. So all those tools, we use light therapy device. I don't have one with me at the moment, but a GRT light is a light device that I developed. It's red and infrared, and we use that to stimulate the meridian points of the body. And the way we describe it, it resets the holographic communication of the body. So it's one thing to make a correction on the body, physically, I mean, and then there's the energetic side of that correction, the meridian system of the body. So we use the light therapy to reset the wholeness of the body for that reason. And we find a better result when we do both. You can make the correction with the light by itself. You can make the correction with the physical correction by itself. But when you do both together, you get an even bigger result. So that's why we use those tools. You could do everything we do manually. You could use, I like the impulse of an activator or an arthrostim or those types of tools. I like the deep tendon reflex ability. There's 3 entries into the nervous system. So there's motor, muscle skeletal, there's sensory, which is your 5 senses, and then there's deep tendon reflex. When somebody gets paralyzed, they lose motor sensation, they lose muscle skeletal, they lose sensation, but most often they will retain their deep tendon reflex. So that deep tendon reflex becomes the entry into working with paralysis, right? So if you start understanding these principles of where do I have access into the nervous system? If I have access through the deep tendon reflex, let's make strategies of using that deep tendon reflex to achieve the desired result, right? We tap that reflex to get those muscles moving. And at first it's a reflex, and then it becomes like reps, and you start using this like an exercise concept where you will get access to those muscles, even though it's using a different pathway. And then it initiates the other pathways to turn on. And, again, it's all strategies on bringing function back. We have strategies of bringing muscle function back, sensory function back, and deep tendon function back. So when we use these all together, what it looks like is you could take somebody who's suffered from a stroke and you could rehabilitate them. They could recover their sensation. They could recover their ranges of motion. They could recover their dexterity. And again, I can't promise or guarantee results. I'm just saying these are the strategies we use to achieve these things. And we have recordings of people who we've done this with. But every person's different, and not everybody responds 100% to 100% of the things that are done. So just to get all that out of the way, right? So, but the key is to have a strategy to understand how to evaluate the nervous system, not having fear of seeing somebody who's had a stroke or a brain injury, or, I had a guy who literally had a pipe go through his head. He was missing half of his brain. And how do you check him? The same way you check all the neurology of the body. The neurology is the terrain of the nervous system. And if we understand that terrain and how to evaluate it and how to correct it, it's life-changing. It's life-changing. And you'll be impressed with how little you need to adjust if you understand the exact nerves that are offline and the exact corrections that's necessary to bring those back. And people are just shocked at, wow, I could move better. I feel better. And instantly, we're not talking about 10 visits from now. Instantly, you're getting these nerves to come back online, and they could feel the difference as soon as they get up off the table. And that's what we want. We want results that patients could get right away. We want people to feel good about taking money out of their pocket and handing it to the doctor that's receiving these strategies, these techniques. And, we've been teaching this for 20 years and helping a lot of people. So, we'd like to help more.
Wow. Yeah, no, thank you for your service to the profession. I'm curious if we could just pivot a little bit to a broader context. You had mentioned quantum physics.
Right.
From my vantage point, one of our missing links, or what I believe to be like the primary subluxation of the chiropractic profession, is our ignorance to the importance of training prospective students to almost pre-qualify them and prime them so that when they get to chiropractic school, they have a more fulfilling experience. And I'm just curious from your vantage point, and your observations of having been in the profession for so long and having friends who have been in the profession and being a creative thinker and an artist and a scientist, what are we missing? And I guess, what are some solutions? Without talking too much about the problems, I'm just curious of any solutions that you may have for our profession, and then we can bring it back to this conversation, but I'm just curious, just as a tangent.
Sure. I would, because our audience is probably mostly students, I'd like to say one of the biggest hacks that I would do if I were to go back to school right now is, and I don't know who when I went to school, it was Irene Gold. I don't know if Irene Gold's still out there. And there's other ones, they're all wonderful. I would take those courses as soon as possible, before I'm supposed to, because if I have biochemistry and anatomy and all these things that are on the board, if I take the board review first and then I take the class, it's reinforcing what I've already learned in the board review, but it prepares me for the course because I know the answers already. It's reflexive answers in those courses, kind of thing. And that's what I would do personally. And I recommend that to students out there if they have that opportunity. In terms of the profession, I think, the key is we all have to work together. We're not competitors. until there's, even dentists don't consider each other competitors, right? And there's buildings full of dentists, one building full of dentists, and they're not competitors, and there's plenty of business for everybody. Our profession has enough for everybody to grow 10 times without affecting each other as competitors, right? And I think that's the biggest issue overall in the health profession. We're all fighting for the same patient kind of idea. And that's not necessarily true. I feel that if you focus in a specific area, what's the saying? Niche makes you rich, right? So if you focus in a specific area, whether that's family care or sports or, like myself in neurology, and of course that's my bias and my recommendation. But if you focus in an area, you're going to become known as the person who handles those issues. Doctors are going to refer to you for those issues. If I'm not an infant practitioner adjusting infants, I'm going to want to refer that to somebody who's really good at that, somebody who has children themselves and so on, all that kind of experience. And the same with neurology. I have doctors referring for me, around the world. I'm consulting doctors always, dealing with their most difficult cases, telling them what to do and what the strategies are. And so we work with that. But you're going to get sought out if you're unique. If you're just like every other person down the road, yes, there's a service for that. And yes, there are people that want that service. But if you want to stand out, you're going to have to get something that makes you unique. And it may be a collection of things. There's maybe many doctors that practice neuroemotional technique, for example, but then you'll see, well, hey, I could do neuroemotional technique and quantum neurology and applied kinesiology. And, you can create a specific set of tools that you're working with that make you a well-rounded practitioner. Dr. Jay Dunn's work is amazing. I'd recommend checking that out. Dr. Noah Leibowitz and his Nutrition, Supreme Nutrition, excellent resources there. So there's so much out there for people to do. And it's, again, for me, I focused in on neurology, and I know the nervous system is the target for us chiropractors. And that's why when you focus on that nervous system concept and rehabilitating from there, all those other concepts are available to you as a specialty. So it's very powerful to do that.
Yeah, just as we wrap up here, can you maybe set the student who's interested now in quantum neurology on a path by maybe describing some of the, not prerequisites, but like what would be a good foundation for a student to go embark upon developing within themselves in preparation for eventually winding up in a quantum neurology seminar? I heard you just mention applied kinesiology. I've heard you mention sacro-occipital technique. Is there any books or resources? I know like there's so much out there. So if you could maybe simplify it just with a couple of seminars or courses or certifications or books that you're a big fan of that you think help students really develop that strong foundation so that they can make the most of the time with you.
Absolutely. My personal program is called Quantum Neurology, and we have the NRE, the Neuro Rehab Essentials training. That's where we start people. And we teach them how to take the foundations of neurology and to evaluate and strengthen them all. So we bring people to what we call neutral. Neutral means that every nerve is firing when called upon. We want and most of the healing happens just simply by doing that, by turning the nerve to its proper function. And for doing the entire nervous system that way, that's how we teach doctors to begin. And then once they get certified in that level of work, we have other offerings to take them more advanced in the musculoskeletal or the cranial or the sensory, the visceral, and then we have an advanced certification called QNCP, Quantum Neurology Certified Practitioner. And in terms of, not prerequisites, but preparing yourself for the neurology concept, simply the neurology that you're learning in school, learn your myotones, learn your cranial nerves, learn the sensory concepts. I could simplify these things, and that's my gift is I take really complex neurological principles and I make them easily digestible for anybody to learn and just go, oh, there it is. Let's get rid of all the stuff we don't need and just focus on the stuff that we do, right? How do we deliver the result? How do we evaluate the neurology? How do we stimulate the body for correction and retest the neurology to deliver a definitive before and after neurological shift? And that's the main focus there is learn the terrain of the nervous system, understand those principles. I introduced the concept of holographic nervous system. So the principle of holographic is simply that the entire nervous system is communicating constantly and simultaneously on all levels. Tissue, cellular, muscular, bone, everything is communicating all at once. That's why we cut our finger, instantly it starts healing, right? We didn't have to, hey, send a message to, so-and-so to send the white blood cells over, right? It's instantly all communicating all at once. And that's why we call it holographic. And when we look at the nervous system from that perspective, it changes things. It changes it from this linear thing that we kind of learned the subway chart in school. This goes to this point and then to the next, to this functionality of this holographic 3D instrument that God gave us that does these amazing things when it's all working right? And we remove the interference, as we were taught in chiropractic school, and the body heals itself. It's the most amazing thing, right? When you see it happen right in front of your eyes, and you're like, wow. And sometimes you can literally see that healing happen in the person right in front of you, and your eye, the inflammation comes down, the redness comes down. You're like, wow, I just did this. And I shouldn't say because I just removed the interference, right? The nervous system is doing it. The patient's nervous system is healing itself. We remove that interference from their body. We retaught that communication to happen properly, and the body heals itself. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. The chiropractic philosophy is true, it's strong, it's real. It's the nervous system. It's the nervous system heals itself. And, again, like I said, above, down, inside, out, all the things that were talked about, ADIO, and, it's all real. And that's a beautiful thing. I know in school we would have people that would like, nah, come on, whatever, woohoo, whatever kind of thing people may say or think. And then as you're actually working on people and you actually see things happen, you're like, wow, they weren't lying. This stuff is real. When you see, I had a doctor that I trained who worked with a child whose left side of her body didn't grow as much. She didn't have hair on one side of her body. And he made one correction on her. She had all this breathing problems, and they told her that she was going to die at 9 years old, kind of thing. They did a genetic research study on her, like some serious stuff. And literally after one correction, she went from spitting sputum full in like a liter cup every day to running around and just full of energy. Outlived her diagnosis, by two times. I think she's in mid-20s now. She's a nurse. She went to high school, college, did the whole thing, right? And again, remove that interference and the body heals itself. And this girl, her hair grew out and she didn't grow her limbs longer, but she was able to functionally do what a child should do, which is have fun and run around and live their life, right? And I love working on kids because that's when you make changes that will affect their entire life. It's huge.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate it. I think just sharing people such as yourself with prospective students, like just imagining if I was able to listen to your message as a college student, it would inspire me to know what's possible. I think sometimes we have no idea what's possible until somebody shares real stories with us that are like, wow, I can go and develop skills and develop myself into a professional that's capable of helping people that have just had a stroke or had a brain injury and maybe lost their ability to function on a basic level, talk or hear or see, and make changes in those people. It's wow, like I had no idea that the reason I went to chiropractic school is I went into an office and this person saw somebody in a wheelchair, saw a little kid, and saw an athlete all in the same day, and I said, I'm sold. Like I can see people from all walks of life. All right, let's do this.
And
So
it's a
anyway, final wrap up.
question we have.
If I can just give you the final words for us as we sign off here.
Well, you know, I really appreciate the time, and I thank you all for listening to me. Please check out Quantum Neurology, quantumneurology.com, and you know, at Dr. George Gonzalez DC and on Instagram, or at Quantum Neurology on Instagram as well, and give nervous system rehabilitation the opportunity. See how your body responds to it. It's such a powerful concept, and I'm confident that it will help all of you get to the highest levels of your chiropractic dreams.